They never got back to you,
But
huh?
well, they did. Hold on. Uh,
What did old Gary say?
Gary really wants to talk to me about different things pertaining to soteriology. I
Oh
want to
yeah.
kick him in the face. Hold on a minute. That
I
wasn't
turned it down.
like that wasn't obvious what you're doing.
I was actually
What were you doing?
I'm actually I do this when I do wine tasting because it actually when the wine's in your mouth and you
Yeah.
slurp in a little bit,
Yeah.
you get all the aromas in your mouth and you get to taste the aroma and the wine at the same time. And I'm drinking a very lovely Fume Blanc, which is a Sauvignon Blanc. Tastes
I don't know what you
bits
said.
of cedar. You get a little bit of cedar, fresh grass, fresh cut grass.
Grass.
All the
Blanc is
different
white
tastes,
wine, right?
citrus, yes, all the citrus flavors, like orange, maybe tart lemon,
So like a
gooseberries.
lemongrass?
Yes,
Ooh,
yes.
Okay.
So you get all these flavors with this Fume Sauvignon with a light toasted oak to it. So
I
yes,
love tree tastes.
I am
don't
a
know.
connoisseur.
I don't know what oak tastes like, but
Go lick a tree, you'll find
You
I'm
out.
will.
gonna
You
go
will
look
when you
at
come
your-
over here and you go to the wine tasting with us. You'll definitely be able to pick it out. It's
You know,
a
if you
flavor
go
you'll
over
be able to pick it
here
out right
to where
away.
I'm at, you can go to Oakland and taste any of the oaks that we have here in Oakland.
Wow, I like that.
I'm actually going to go
Sounds
to
like
Jack
they
London
would be-
Square later tonight and go see a jazz performance for free at the pier. It's going to be really nice.
Are they
Nice.
going to have oak?
And you know what else? I've also brought with me a Rose d'Anjou from Laura Valley, France.
Wow.
And I will be tasting that a little bit tonight too to see how it tastes for my blind tasting I'm going to have with some people.
I brought my Kroger purified drinking water, and
Wow.
that's it. I need a Pepsi. I will be right back.
Do it,
Story
man.
Boy and D-Bag David.
I like Story Boy. I think Josh has got the best one since he's
I'm
always
totally
about
gonna. I'm
narrative.
gonna wear a shirt that says Story Boy on it.
Yeah. You should
now on.
coin that phrase, man.
Right. There we go.
We should probably mute our mics.
Yep.
I hope that all of you back on Earth can see what we mean when we say it's a rather foreboding horizon, a rather dark and unappetizing looking place. We're now going over, approaching one of our future landing sites, selected in this smooth region to call the Sea of Tranquility. Smooth in order to make it easy. for the initial landing attempts in order to preclude having to dodge mountains. Now you can see the long shadows of the lunar sunrise. We are now approaching lunar sunrise, and for all the people back on Earth, the crew of Apollo 8 has a message that we would like to send to you. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good, and divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. And God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." And God made the firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. And God said, "Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. And God saw that it was good. And from the crew of Apollo 8, we close with good night, good luck, a Merry Christmas, and God bless all of you on the good earth.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Faith Unaltered. I'm your host, David Russell, along with my co-host, Tyler Fowler, the legend, the man, the myth, all that stuff. He didn't want to keep the names that we had on there earlier, so he changed them all back. But we were
after
laughing
that
and we
intro.
made we made some crazy stuff, but we're back to normal now. So welcome, guys. Hey, you know what? This is an open mic night.
Yep.
We're going to be talking about Genesis. We're going to be talking about creation, as you saw in the very beginning of the video there that I posted. Great 1968 message from the Apollo 8. So,
Drink to
guys,
that.
we got our other co-host here that helps us out as part of our team. One of the many legends that grace our presence, Joshua Davidson,
What's up, guys?
otherwise known as
What's up,
Story Boys.
Story boy. So I just couldn't do it, man. Like, we had such a great intro, and it was so serious and beautiful. And I didn't think people would very much like D-Bag David, Heretic Center, and Story Boy staring them right in the face. And so I came back on and I changed it. So if you think that was a good decision, please post in the comments below. Yes, give me a thumbs up. If it wasn't, give me a thumbs down. And if you prefer Heretic and D-Bag David as Story Boy, I'll change it back. Okay? I'll change it back. But what
We'll
is
go to the boat.
excited.
So, Tyler, did you like my surprise, my little promo of Apollo 8?
Bro, I was not expecting that. That was sweet. I did not know that happened, and I'm glad that you shared that with me and our audience.
Yeah, man, you get a little piece of history now. You know, it's amazing. But yeah, so
It touched
guys,
my
this
heart, bro.
This
It really did.
this is the start of our creation series. We had the pregame with Dane, where he was supposed to present the Young Earth view. However, they put me on the spot, him and Tyler. And I got beat over the head about old Earth creations. But now we're going to actually start. It's not just going to cover creation. It's also going to cover a lot with science too. So we've got great questions coming your way. We got great guests that we're going to wait to surprise you with.
Oh,
So,
okay. That's a surprise to
Yeah,
me.
I don't
I did not know that.
want to reveal it yet. I want
Okay.
the thumbnails to reveal it, you know, and maybe make a little intro once we've got everything set up the way we want it. But we're going to be covering great questions like, you know, can I trust anything that's not scientifically proven? Does evolution disprove God?
Does
We
science
got
make
great.
God
We got
obsolete?
the old Earth view scholars coming on. We've got young Earth scholars we're trying to get them to come on as well. So we're gonna try to range this,
hey.
man. We're gonna try to really
Look
range this.
who's
And we've got
here.
another Heretic Center, Joshua.
What
Yeah.
up?
We got Josh
Kindy
squared up on
Martins.
here again.
I'll only be here for about maybe 5-10 minutes, but
That's
wanted to hop
fine.
in
Oh,
and
man.
maybe launch a thought.
All right.
So
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
You anyway.
So we'll let you go first then.
Yeah, let's do that. So Josh and I. So here's the thing. So David has no idea what we're getting ready to talk about, and so I contacted Davidson, Sherman, and Garrett Skytema, who I think might. I don't know. I got to look at my messages, guys. I have no idea. Anyway, so like David was saying, we are jumping into creation and Genesis, right? I want to talk about Genesis 1. I want to talk about Genesis 2. But I want to talk about this from a view that we haven't discussed. We've referenced it, but we have not discussed it. And so I invited Davidson and Sherman and Skytema to come on to talk about the symbolic view of Genesis. I want to look at the Garden of Eden as the cosmic temple. I want to look at what man, being made in the image of God, was put on earth for. God created the world for mankind, the entire cosmos, right? For mankind. And so I want to explore those concepts. And to do that, I thought, who better than the narrative structure guys themselves, Josh Davidson and Josh Sherman. So Sherman, I will kick the ball over to you since you only got a few minutes.
all right.
Lay us out what it is. What is the symbolic view of Genesis, and anything else that you want to add to that? Is that
Yeah,
a good name for it? Is that the symbolic view? Is that
It's-
good, or how would you word it?
I would probably say something like the functional
Angel
liturgical view.
Okay.
Or because when you think symbolic, we often bring ideas about what symbols mean that are kind of modern materialistic disconnected. So a symbol is just something that means something to us in our heads, but there's no real connection to the reality behind it. And what we see, biblically, and I think in the history of the church is a stronger understanding of what that means. But one of the things that gets interesting with this is starting to think about it and saying, okay, when Genesis is describing the movement of these different things, the creation of these different things, the ordering of these different things, what is that doing, right? And we often think of it in terms of material creation. So it's God, creating, and then like sun comes out of nothing, and it's literally just about the creation, the start of all these things. And there's an aspect of it, and you don't have to read these as either or, right? We've had that conversation, David.
Right.
Right. But there's a way of looking at it that's very consistent with the way that other ancient Near Eastern cultures understood creation, where it was more about the placing things in their proper place. And so if we read Genesis that way, what we come up with is essentially that Genesis is about God creating the cosmos as a temple, as a place of meeting between him and his creation. And if we do that, then we start asking these questions about what the image of God is, right? And there are kind of two things that end up kind of playing in there primarily when you think about the role of humankind, right? One of them is the image of God. So it's like, you can actually say idol. We just bring ideas that are unhelpful to that because the only context we have for that idea is paganism and bad stuff. But that paganism and bad stuff is imitating this idea that the living God can create living imagers to represent him and embody him, right? And what the problem with paganism is like multifold. It's not the creator God. It's dead representations of these imitations that want to be something, but that can't actually create. Right. So there's that side of it. The other aspect of it is looking at it in terms of Adam as a priest. And one of the interesting things with that we get is connecting that in later in the New Testament. We get into Hebrews, and we get into Christ at his ascension, going up and offering of his own blood to cleanse the cosmos. Which is the implications of cleansing the heavenly tabernacle, the sacred space in heaven. And so that opens up this whole kind of different idea about what we're talking about when we're talking about what Jesus did, what he accomplished to save us, that it's more than just conquering sin, more than conquering death, but also cleansing creation of the taint of sin. And another aspect to that really this hit me just this morning, is thinking like one of the reasons I think that idolatry started to fall when you had the spread of the gospel was the revealing of the true image of God on the cross, right? Ooh, you have Christ, the one who is, Scripture calls him the express image of God. Obviously, we believe that he is part of the Trinity, right? So we're not talking image in the same sense that we are as a creation, but in the sense that he's truly the image of God, and that we then actually, in beholding Christ, become made more or kind of recovered in the fullness of the image that we were created to be in the first place, to operate the way we're supposed to, representing and embodying God as the body of Christ. So there's all of this connectivity kind of across the testaments of this. And I think that the unveiling of the true image of God, the one who represents God and embodies God perfectly on the cross, is part of what made all of the false images of false gods just fall away when people said, wow, that's it. I can see the truth. The rest of this stuff just doesn't matter anymore. I don't need to fear these gods. I don't need to serve them. I don't need to worship them. I don't need to sacrifice, meat or children or anything else to them. I can walk away and know that I'm free, because the perfect image of God, not only was up there on the cross, but he conquered death. So I don't need to fear death. I don't need to fear what these gods can do to me. Like, in their heads, that's what people started to think as the gospel got proclaimed, and they just walked away from it. So,
So Josh, just let me run this by you.
Yeah.
So you're kind of saying that in their mind, there would be no debate, there would be no thought of this 6 hour or 6 day, 24-hour day view, this young earth, old earth controversy. It would just be like, okay, we're looking at it like this.
Yeah.
versus another way.
Well,
And then
I
on
mean-
top of that, I also have to ask this
Yeah.
because we have to get into some real world stuff too, which
Mhm.
is obviously related. I'm not saying it's not, so I'm not separating the two. I'm actually, I really
Right.
try to combine the two, but to talk about it, you got to kind of separate it sometimes, you know, to
Yeah.
you know, you know what I mean, Josh. You know what I mean. But did they always believe in predatory prey relations? You know, did they always have this notion? I mean, it seems that that's reflective, and this is why, you know, I don't hold the position. And you said it the best earlier that it's not a end all be all,
Mhm.
but like, yeah, like I would always think that they had this idea of these predatory prey relations. They believe that you know these things were probably common, you know, since before you know creation began, but you know they had to think about those things, so we think about them now. So like you know, how does this relate to it all? You know, because you see it supported in scripture, you know, that God gives the lion its prey. You know, you see it in not only the Psalms, you see it in the Proverbs. You know, you see reflections of it in Job, you know, and all throughout the Old Testament. So we have these different ideas and stuff. So that's basically my question in a nutshell. Did these guys have these notions, or it wasn't obviously old Earth, young Earth? You know, they just
Yeah.
had a view, right?
They're not thinking billions or 6,000 years, you know.
Billions of years
Yeah.
didn't come into
You know.
existence, even in their mindset, until
Yeah.
the 18th, 19th century, right? So,
Yeah.
no,
Well,
they
we
wouldn't
can
have
say
these
that about
conversations.
young. They could say
but
this
I'm
about
just
the
saying they
young
wouldn't
Earth
have
too,
these
right?
conversations.
Yeah, I mean,
exactly. It was.
I
it was
think they would
totally
frame
different.
it differently for
Yeah.
sure, whatever the discussion was like. I honestly, I mean,
Yeah.
there's a depth of that I don't know. I mean, it hasn't been a specific area of focus to me to try to look at whether there was anything kind of like the discussions that we have today going on back then. I know that
Right.
we have more, we would call it allegorical kind of looks at some of this stuff. In some of the church fathers, and so you know, yeah, we have some of that kind of stuff that isn't as literal as we often want to think of it when we're thinking like, oh, God, you know, spoke, poof, here comes this thing, and that's exactly what happened. They would talk about more about what it means, right, in that instance. But as far as the kind of discussions we have today, I think in a lot of cases they have the same kinds of questions because they're asking how did we get here, but I think they framed a lot of it so differently it's a little bit hard to kind of pack
It wasn't viewed. It
Yeah,
wasn't
and this
viewed
is
through the same
guys. This is
lens,
why.
so to
This
say.
is why you know, and me and Travis Worth, we agree on a lot, but we differ on some things too, right?
Mhm.
So like where I see like a analogical, just like Travis does, but I also see a framework type thing because I do see that there's a snapshot of what God's actually doing, right? In it.
Mhm.
And time's not a factor for me where it is for the YEC folks. They really want it to be the 24-hour period, but Jews didn't have it in notion to have a 24-hour period.
I think it's
you know,
interesting how
but-
you frame it like that, David. But here's the thing. So I want to. There's a couple things I really want to touch on.
And I got to
So-
hop off in about 2 minutes. So
Okay, let
so
Josh let Josh respond before
do.
you jump in, Tyler.
I'm going to. Go
oh
ahead,
yeah,
Josh.
no, go ahead. I mean, because I don't have anything specific to say to that.
Okay, so a couple things about the predatory thing. So I think that whenever we actually dive into the text, and maybe we'll get to this at some point tonight, but after the flood, Genesis 9, right, we see this real big emphasis, and Josh, maybe you could speak on this and what is significant about this. But we see in Genesis 1 where the plants are given as food for
Mhm.
both humans and animals, correct? And it's not only until after the flood, after Noah, that we even get this first hint of eating animals, right? Whether it is humans eating animals or animals eating animals or anything like that, it's addressed to humans. That's significant, and I think it speaks to this, but I want your thoughts on it, Josh. What
Yeah.
is significant about that? Is it significant to this? Or
It's interesting. I'm not sure. I think it may be a little bit like the way that we kind of contend to read Lex Talionis in the Old Testament law a little bit backwards. where a lot of times people look at that and they say an eye for an eye means if you take an eye, I can take an eye, and I'm authorized to take it, and I should take it, and it's my right, and all of these things.
Fair is fair.
When it's really what it's more like is like, no, you can't, like, if someone takes your eye, you can't just kill them. Right. It's meant to be a limitation on what you're actually doing in response, rather than this authorization to take it. Right. And I think what we may see in Genesis 9 is more of a sense of God saying, okay, like, this is the limitation. These are the limitations here. Because when we see in Genesis 6 and some of the kind of explosions of wickedness, there is this sense of killing, right? That kind of explodes upon the earth. And if we bring in any of the other ways that, the literature that in the Second Temple period, when people were writing about this in Jewish circles, there's a lot about, blood and killing and all of that, and just this proliferation of that going alongside it. I think what we get in Genesis 9 may be more a sense of like, okay, like, here are the rules for this. Like, this is the way people have been just taking things, but now, like, this is what I'm saying you're not supposed to do. So, you're not supposed to just murder other people. That's bad. People are made in the image of God. When you're talking about eating animals, you're still not supposed to eat the blood. That is the life is in the blood. That belongs to God. Don't eat that, because what you're doing by ingesting that is like, it's almost like you're trying to take the life force of that animal into you. And that's actually beneath you as a human being. It's not what you're supposed to be doing. So I think it may be more that sense of limitation than like, this is the first time this is ever authorized or given to people. But I'd have to look at it in more detail. And that's running kind of, big picture moments. Because
that's still 10 generations after Adam, right? And we get the fall back in Genesis 3. And so clearly there's death right at that point. And that's interesting. Josh Davison, brother, what are your thoughts on the conversation so far?
I'm gonna have to jump out.
All right, Josh. Appreciate you swinging.
I love
by,
you guys.
Bro. Love you too, man.
See you, buddy.
See ya. All right, brother.
Well, we had Josh squared for like 2 seconds there. That was cool.
It's always nice to have Josh squared.
Yeah, I'm telling you, Sherman is wonderful. He's a great guy.
Wonderful.
He really
many words to choose from, right?
He pushes me really like in the right way. He pushes me. It's like he's not being contentious or disagreeing. He's being careful, and it makes me want to be careful.
Right.
And I really appreciate that. I think that he was probably onto something in thinking about the mention of eating animals and not eating lifeblood as a warning about, let's say, a limit to something rather than an introduction to a new thing. Because even, let's say, Cain and Abel was a shepherd, and what were they doing with the sheep? It's like they weren't making sheep skin jerkins. It wasn't snowing. Like like there was something about I think what we're doing is trying to take a distinction that exists in our modern minds because of the way that we look at predation, and thinking about like moral assertions that I don't think are actually there a lot of the time. And it's not necessarily like predation is like naturally something that is pleasant or enjoyable to look at all the time, but it's not necessarily a moral evil. You know what I mean? That lions eat meat. Like, we don't blame them for that. They're not blameworthy. It's part of their design. It's part of the aesthetic of having a system in which something domineers over other things, right? And I think it's the imbalance of that domineering that actually becomes something that makes it wrong or unsuitable, not necessarily evil.
I want to get your thoughts on something real quick, just so to sidetrack. So we all believe, I think, that there's going to be lions in the new creation, and yet death will be one of those things that ceases to exist. So you said that the predator, the picture that we see whenever we think of a lion chasing down a gazelle that we see on National Geographic, right? Like, that's normal, but in that context, it won't be normal, right? And so I think
I don't know. I'm not sure that in the new heavens and new earth we'll be looking at animals in the exact same way as we're doing it now, because animals have entropy and they run down and they require food for energy, and they're not immortals. And so I just don't know. Like, there's no point of reference for me to know what an immortal animal would be and why it would eat what it would eat, if it would eat at all.
Yeah.
We can take the literal look at lion and lamb, or we can take another look at it. And I just think it goes much
I don't-
deeper too. So I mean,
No, I agree.
and then you
I
look at hold on, and then
Go
you
ahead.
you look at this idea of equilibrium here, and it's a good thing. Like I think it
Mhm.
was not too long ago, and Craig cited this as well. There were a place where these animals, these certain herbivores, were multiplying, right?
Mhm.
And they were multiplying to a point where they were suffering. I mean, they were running out of food, and then they introduced their natural predator,
Wolves.
who was wolves,
Yeah.
back into that environment.
Yep.
And because the wolves did their job and preyed upon the other animal, it created an equilibrium which allowed those herbivores to thrive,
Right.
which is a good thing. So
Yeah.
so you gotta think, what is the Bible trying to convey to us? What snapshot is it giving us here
No,
on this
I agree.
idea of death? There's got to be more to this idea of death, because God said to Adam, the day you eat of this, you will die. The day
Right.
you eat of it, right?
Sure.
The day he ate of it, that day he did not die in the physical sense.
Right.
it's
Not in a
interesting-
24-hour period.
It's
Yeah.
interesting, David, that you're reading that, so literal. I was watching a really good discussion with Chris Date on this subject, and I recommend anybody listen to his what he talked about death. That's the name of the video. Death, what the Bible says about death. And there's a couple ways you can look at that, really. One, the day, it can be like in my Father's Day. Another thing, and you and I have talked about this before, and I think that there's really a lot more weight to this, because I agree with you. I think it is talking about the literal day that Adam ate. You talk about Adam dying, and yet, even though Adam did not die, he died, 900 years later. We tend to overlook, and Dane and I have talked about this, and I think we even brought it up on that episode, that something did die that day. And I think it's a beautiful picture, and it, and I want to get back to Genesis 1 and 2 and 3, and however far we get into it. But I'll say this, and I'll turn it back over to you guys. The picture that paints for atonement, right? Whether you hold to a substitutionary Christus Victor or whatever, the picture that we see, the lamb or the animal that was slain, and the skins, the Bible says that God placed these skins on Adam and Eve. He covered them. And man, it's that beautiful picture of what Christ really does for us. It's a type and shadow of what Christ does. And he covers us with his righteousness, right? And so, regardless of how you want to look at it, I believe God showed Adam mercy. And I think young earth people would say this as well, that God showed Adam mercy in that even though something did die, it wasn't Adam. And, it does go deeper than that. Another thing I'll say, just real quick on the whole thing, I agree with you guys. I think it's much, much deeper. And I don't want anybody watching this video to think that young earth, old earth, whoever, right, only has one view of Genesis. And what I mean by that is they only take it literal, or they only take it in a polemic. I think it's dangerous to do that, and we shouldn't. I'll just say this. I look at Genesis, and I know a lot of other people that do this as well, like Exodus, in the sense of the 10 plagues. Even though there was a polemic that was happening against, and Josh Sherman and I talked about this right before this episode, even though there's this aspect of this polemic against the gods of Egypt, Yahweh versus the gods of Egypt, these events still happened historically, right? We can look back and see that they happened. And so that's what I'll say to that, and I'll turn it back over to you guys.
Just one thing I noticed as you were talking about the substitutionary atonement.
Yeah.
Is that you said something died that day. When Genesis says to Adam, you will die that day. And then
Yep.
you get the differentiation of the curses, right?
Yep.
However, even if that was in the mix, a substitution was in the mix. It's really not, because he still died. He still died spiritually. And there's that dual aspect. And I think we can't forget that. So even if that was a substitute for physical death, it wasn't a substitute for a spiritual death.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I think the death that he experienced was obviously spiritual death.
What's that
Two.
mean?
His spirit died. He was totally deprived from that point on. He was beginning to be deprived. I don't want to use it in the in the same respect of as a Calvinist, right?
So
there's in other words, there's more to death than just physical death.
okay, but what
Okay,
my question is,
Yeah.
so
So
hold on. So in Genesis, we get a description, and Josh, maybe you can speak to this, what this means, but we think, and I think Chris really brings this point out in his video, that what makes a human so special is that two things, namely, one, a human is an embodied spirit. God breathes the breath of life into this person, and two, namely, that this person is made in the image of God. And so we've talked about those concepts before, but whenever you say his spirit died, do you mean the breath of God that invigorates him and it enlivens him somehow died, or what does that look like? David.
I thought you said Josh.
No, I mean, I'm saying Josh can speak to the symbolic nature of.
So ask that one more time, because I was
Basic.
blocking something.
Because she was blocking something. So basically, the point that I'm trying to make is that
he was asking if the nefesh died, or if you mean something else.
yeah, the because we get a picture of humans as a body and the breath that God breathed into them, right?
Mhm.
So whenever you say spiritual death, do you mean that spirit, that breath of God that invigorates people and makes them alive died somehow, or
Yes, there's some part of that died. There's something that went on there in the spirit that was tainted and gone. You know, I'm not a physicalist, so I do believe in duality, right? So I do think that there was something spiritual that died there, and I also
Okay.
think that there was
up,
a
Caleb?
physical I don't want to say like death as we mean just like stamped out.
like he
What's a
started
good
to
word
die?
for it? Like like there's no more eating of the tree of life, right? There's no more of that. You know, he got kicked out of the garden. You know, there's no more
Uh-huh.
eating of that to rejuvenate and keep his body from entropy, right? So
Uh-huh.
started his natural process that God had for the rest of the world there. So yeah, so I mean, yeah, I think there's a lot more going on there than just physical death.
But you would say entropy started before that, right? Or did I misunderstand you?
Yes,
Okay.
I think mankind was kept from that. Absolutely. And maybe things in
Kept
the
from
garden that ate from that. Kept from entropy, yeah. Mankind was kept from entropy because they were in the garden.
Oh, so Adam,
Yeah.
while he was in the garden, didn't experience entropy. The second one.
Yeah,
Because he had
yeah,
access
because
to
yeah,
the
he
tree
would
of life.
eat. Yeah, the access to the tree of life. Yeah.
But he didn't have to eat from the tree to receive its benefits.
Yes, he did.
So he didn't. So just being in
For
the presence of
physical
the tree
life,
of
yes.
life didn't
Yes.
matter then, right?
Yeah. Well, actually, it did because that
It
would
did.
keep
Okay.
his physical body on a plane. Because you got to think in this reality, we have bounds, we have limits. We have we run into matter. You know, with that comes repercussions. Like I can walk and stub my toe. You know, that's not
Sure.
necessarily an evil that I would relate to suffering, and put it on the problem of evil. But I would say that's a natural boundary that exists that can help me even learn not to stub my toe again and watch where I'm freaking walking, man.
No, I agree, and so
Yeah,
I think
so-
that's you keep referring
hey,
to that,
let
and then
me-
Caleb, I want you to jump in.
Yeah.
But you keep saying that suffering and death and things of this can be used to be good, and I don't think anyone is arguing against that fact. I think God does use death to accomplish good things, right? But at the same time, I think there's still going to be good in the new heavens and the new earth whenever there's no such thing as death, and it's irrelevant at that point of what even death is because it doesn't exist, right? And so I think it's going to be interesting regardless.
Yeah, and I would agree. New heavens, new earth, whole new boundaries, and whole new system. I think there's going to be something that's totally beyond what we could think or imagine.
Yeah.
And I think that our boundaries here keep us from thinking and imagining it.
And yet we
So-
see a glimpse of it in the resurrection of
We
Jesus.
do
so-
see the glimpse of it. Yes, absolutely. But yeah, I want to introduce my one of the team
What's up,
members
Caleb?
here that we love so much. Is Caleb Jackson. What's up, brother?
What's up? Thank you for having me on as an open mic. I just
Yes,
saw it was
sir.
going. Forgot you were
Yeah,
having
you're
it today. I
always
was like,
welcomed
"Oh,
on, even if it's not an open mic. You're welcomed on here.
That's
so-
right.
thanks. I'll just hop on during the middle of the debate. Yeah. Anyway, thanks. Yeah. I
Oh, we're
caught the
switching
tail end.
topics, bro.
was yeah.
No, I was just gonna say we're gonna switch topics up, but go ahead.
Oh no, I just caught the tail end of what you were saying.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, thought it was interesting. As far as entropy and stuff like that goes. So I know David is a OEC kind of Rawsian, like Hugh Ross's model, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And I think Tyler, you're a YEC, right?
Well, I'm studying, so
Okay, it's always a good answer.
absolutely.
Yeah, and I would be in the theistic evolutionist camp, so you have a good trinity.
Oh, we
you'd
should
say,
talk.
of things. Right?
Yeah.
And I don't know Joshua that well, but glad to see he's here.
Awesome. Yeah. So Caleb, what do you think about what we've been talking about so far?
Yeah,
You know,
again,
what
I
you
only heard
caught.
the last part of it, but in terms of like entropy in the garden and stuff like that,
Yeah, absolutely. for it.
I mean, yeah, I would say that there was death before. I think that the garden is referring to something else, but I do think that there was certainly predation prior to the fall, and I think that Michael Jones, I think, argues that and there's a dissertation he cites. Can't remember the name of it. I think it's called like Death in the Garden, but the words used by God when he says conquer the grass and the land and the animals, rule over them. He's using very harsh words in the Hebrew, which implies like hunting and is this very violent language. It's the same word used for like war conquering and stuff. So he's not just saying like take care of them like they're pets. And so you do get these implications of that. And I think that the tree of life implies that they weren't immortal, because why would you need a tree of life if people already lived forever? So I think in those regards, I would say that it was evident that there was death before the fall. And I think that also explains Cain's wife, as far as, why are there other people here for him to marry? I think you do have other humanoids. And I think genetically we know that Homo sapiens did intermarry with Neanderthals. So I think I'm not saying that Cain's wife was a Neanderthal, but
Yeah.
it's possible if that's how one wants to take it. So
You said something, Caleb. I want to kind of go back to if we can. You said that you viewed the garden differently. Do you not view the Garden of Eden as a physical location, or what's the Garden of Eden?
Yeah. So some people, I think Ross takes the view that the garden was perfect, but everything outside of it was not. And I'm not sure that I would take that view. So usually theistic evolutionists have four. There's one of four positions. I think it's 3 or 4. One of them is they take the idea that Adam and Eve were the original Homo sapiens, but they lived 50,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago, however far you want to put it back. I think William Lane Craig says it might have been Homo habilis. I don't remember how he got to that, but some kind of ancient humanoid creature. Other people say, well, no, they did live 6,000 years ago and they're farming and doing all this stuff, but they weren't the first humans. They were just the first people that, almost like a priest, where God entrusts them to oversee humanity. Like, you were the representatives, even though they're not literally the first ones. And the other, I forget what the third one is, but then the other one is that they're all allegorical. And I'm not really sure where I stand. I think I would probably pick the second one, maybe, but I'm not entirely sure, and I don't know where. I think I agree with Craig. I don't know where the mytho-history, where the myth ends and where the history starts.
Okay.
So I don't think we can know entirely, and I think Genesis is I think most of the Old Testament, especially Genesis, is a very different genre. So I'd be very hesitant to take much of that hyper literally, but I don't think we can know.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
I think
jump in
that's
real
the
quick and-
problem. Yeah, I think that's the problem, though, is that, like, I don't think we have enough background knowledge to say for sure either way. Go ahead, Josh.
I was gonna say, I mean, I didn't mean to interrupt that. I was gonna say, and this is kind of, I mean, it's on topic for the Genesis thing, but it's different than the idea of entropy in the garden and so forth. Is thinking about, because the whole thing that sparked this is the idea of predation, right? So then it kind of begs the question: if Scripture is talking about meaning rather than simply the material reality of something, what is the meaning of eating? What is the meaning of food? What is the meaning of consumption? Right? We know physically, you eat something, and then it becomes subservient to your body. It is broken down into its smallest parts and then dispersed throughout the body and made subservient to the head. Right? That's what happens when you eat something. Let's say I eat a burrito or I eat a bag of chips, right? When I eat it, I actually masticate it in my mouth. I break it down and then I swallow it and my body further breaks it down and then it moves it into my intestine and the intestine,
And then you go
let's
poop.
say, pulls out, exegetes
then
the
you
best
go
parts of
poop.
it. Right? My body exegetes the best part of the food so I can use it and disposes with the rest of it. Right?
Oh, such nice language. You should have just said poop.
And so imagine for just a second there then that eating means something more than filling your gullet, right? Or surviving for a couple more hours or gaining a small burst of energy from whatever your metabolism is doing. Eating means that the thing that you take in becomes part of you. That's what it means. It means that
And
what
there's
you're
also
doing,
entropy going there. There's also entropy actually happening there.
sure, but physically, I'm not talking about that anymore. I'm sidestepping that problem entirely by saying this is what it means rather than what it looks like materially, right? The meaning of a thing doesn't like material reality has very little grasp on meaning. I think meaning comes first. And so what you interact with in real life more than material is meaning. And so material for human beings, especially as cognizant living things that are in the image of God, meaning is much more primary than material is. And so if you look at the meaning of something, let's say the meaning of eating, right? We're in the garden, we're eating whatever it is that God has for us in the garden. We're allowed to eat of anything except for the tree that drops us into duality, right? This knowledge of good and evil and so forth. There's even a tree that grants life. Like, okay, everything you eat grants life in some sense. So this means something different than merely masticating and ingesting, right? You're eating, you're consuming. So much so that in the New Testament, Christ institutes a sacrament of eating. Him. We take in more. This is what we were talking about with Pastor Wolfmueller. Eating is much more significant than simply the material that the fruit is made out of or how many teeth you have to chew it. None of those things are actually relevant anymore. Right. So then in the Old Testament, when we look at eating, right, you're not allowed to eat the life like Sherman was talking about. You're not allowed to consume the life of something that is lesser than you. Right. That's something akin to witchcraft, is actually like vampirism, to try to take in the life of something by consuming its blood. Right. And so you're forbidden to do so. But that doesn't mean that you're forbidden to eat. It means that you're forbidden to eat the life of the thing. Right. So it's meant to be dead by the time you receive it. Right. Which is why eating of Christ in the sacrament is so unique. You're eating the life of something. It's not something below you. It's something above you. And it can bring you up into itself rather than you simply consuming it and making it part of you. It's simultaneously you eating Christ and Christ also eating you. You become consumed into his body. You get broken down and dispersed into his body and become subservient to the head.
Right. You go into him. You go into him.
Having something that's much
more
I
can see that
happening there.
That's interesting.
Right.
Really
and so what
both
Adam
too.
did and what Eve did by eating of the knowledge of, because what they ate was knowledge. That's bizarre. So then they eat knowledge and it brings them down away from God rather than the sacrament, which brings you up into God. Right. And so what they did was, instead of participating in the divine life, they deviated from it. Right. That's what brought about the fall rather than the illumination that should have happened if they received the knowledge of good and evil from God when he decided to bestow it upon them. And instead they commandeered it for themselves and it brought them lower. It didn't bring them higher. They were already in the image of God. And Satan comes around and says, you could be like God, not recognizing for Eve, and Eve doesn't make the connection. You're already like God. Right. And he said, no, but you can have another attribute of God if you would just reach for it. Don't wait around for him to grant it to you. Reach for it. Right. So the eating was unlawful, not because it was eating, not because it was a special kind of mystical magic fruit, but because of the fact that they actually tried to steal for themselves revelation that wasn't yet theirs. I think that's a much bigger problem. And it brings us outside of this kind of dualistic thinking of spirit and matter. Because like in the ancient world, that distinction wasn't the way that we look at it now. right?
Yeah,
And
you
so
know
in
what I
terms
also
of
see.
eating, do you see what I mean by eating?
I
though,
do,
right?
man. I do. It's really clicking. You can also see some of this in the Temptations of Christ.
Absolutely,
know?
especially the
Yeah.
first one. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. So I
turn
was
the
just thinking
stones
about
into
that. That's
bread.
pretty good. But here's the thing, though. When it all comes down to it, when it comes down to this whole old Earth, young Earth, like we're having before with Dane and Tyler's wrong on, I'm sorry, I had to do it. The means of the meaning would support an old Earth. I'm sorry, you can't get a young Earth from that. So, anyways, I'm just I'm really playing with you guys.
Yeah.
But no, I see what you're saying.
I can tell.
It's
yeah.
amazing. It's amazing. What you just said, Josh, was really good. I think there's a lot of truth to those things. Caleb, what do you think, man?
No, I think that's a good point. When you would just bring up the young Earth dichotomy, I was just going to say, I think what a lot of people don't realize is that the young Earth like model is fairly new in terms of Christendom. Yes, there were people like Martin Luther who said it, but the church fathers debated on it. They thought that, and this was well before we had any kind of dating scientifically, but they debated on it and they would read the text. Some of them thought it was an old Earth. Some of them thought that it was even younger than YECs did. I forget which church father said God created it within a few seconds, not within 6 days, and so you get even shorter one. But either
I
way,
think Augustine was instantaneous, wasn't he?
maybe it was, but even then, he's not taking the days literally. He's saying it was even faster. Than
Right.
that.
Right.
The modern YEC view, if I'm not mistaken, comes from the Seventh Day Adventist group, because at the time most people were progressive creationists, because we knew by the 1700s by the geological record as far as the floods go that the Earth was pretty old, and so then you have the leader of the Seventh Day Adventists who has a vision, which along with Jesus coming back, was there was this worldwide flood at 4,000 years ago. And then this got and then this didn't really get popular. Even during the Scopes monkey trial, hardly anyone was a young Earth creationist. They didn't believe in evolution, but they were progressive creationists. And I forget which one of them commented, like, yes, even we wouldn't think the Earth is young. And then the 60s is when you get the book about the flood. I forget who wrote it.
Ken Ham was born.
Yeah, that's true. He got his information, I believe, from this person who wrote the book, The Genesis Flood, in the 60s. And that's what sparked the modern young Earth creationist movement you see with people like Kent Hovind and AIG.
Talking about that one, Caleb?
Yeah, the Genesis Flood.
Yeah, John Whitcomb.
That poor guy.
And Henry Morris. Yeah,
he's so on the wrong track. No, just kidding. I love you, Tyler. I'm just teasing.
Sorry, by the way, I have to
read it all, man. Hey, read it all. Read it all.
Because my camera's with my phone, I had to look over to see you all. So when I'm looking at the camera, thank you for pointing out. I wouldn't have seen the book if you didn't do that, because I'm trying to look in the camera. So,
and Tyler, to be fair, I've got these really old books from on history and stuff like that, on views and stuff like that. I'm gonna love to show them to you while you're here. You're gonna relish them because they're just so old.
I can't wait.
But yeah, they're not Christian books. They're just old historical books that really, the bias wasn't too against Christians and stuff like that, and you're going to be like, wow. But yeah, like read everything you can when it comes to views and stuff like that. And I did it at one time, long time ago, when I was doing the old Earth, young Earth, and stuff like that, because I was heavily young Earth, because that's the denomination I grew up in,
Yeah.
So and I still fight it, I still think about these things. Obviously we've been talking about it, and we're starting a series on it, which, again, guys, if you like the content that you hear, please like, subscribe, and share. It goes a long way. It helps us out. It helps us be able to get more content out there. But the fact is, when you're discussing these things with people are going to have some real life questions that have to do with science. And that have to do with faith, and we're commanded to give an answer. To every man give an answer, right? And we want to give a good answer.
Absolutely.
And we don't have to like with me. I tell you, I don't take a position on certain things. I hold to more of I'm an old Earth creationist. Yes, I believe in an old Earth. However, when I look at Genesis, I have an analogical / polemical what else framework view. I do see snapshots, I think, that God is showing us about the creation. but I can't apply that 100% because I just don't think I have enough background knowledge to say what these ancient Hebrews are actually trying to say in 100% way. All we can do is speculate to a degree of certainty. I mean, I to a degree we can get to certainty, even though we probably won't even get there,
Well, we're getting off on Cartesian certainty. And we
Sorry.
started with Genesis, so here's the thing, David. I'm so glad that you brought up science because given that we have a theistic evolutionist, Caleb, there was something that I was really studying, and I want to see if you hold to it as well. But are you familiar with Luca, the last universal? How did they word it? Basically, everything, all life now, right, stems from this one organism, and they named it Luca, Luca. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Didn't they make a Disney movie named Luca?
There is a Disney movie named Luca, but no, this is
water.
legit.
I didn't know if that's
Yeah.
what it was based off of.
I think so.
I know
they
Lucy.
probably did take it from there.
Maybe,
But
maybe the name was.
I did see it.
They
I
might have.
haven't gone into it yet. But yeah, I saw
Last
what you sent me.
universal common ancestor is what that stands for.
Is that the like a single celled like life form, or is this something else?
So just so the first thing that pops up, the last universal common ancestor or last universal cellular ancestor, also Lua, is the most recent population of organisms from which all organisms now living on Earth share common descent. The most recent common ancestor of all current life on Earth. So you're familiar with what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Okay. So it's not. It doesn't have to mean that it is the like original, but it's just the oldest one that we have. That we know.
Exactly. I think they would date at like 4 billion, something like that. So this is brought up a lot within evolution, and I know. So in the book, The Four Views, to one of the Counterpoint series, Dr. Hugh Ross, had mentioned that he denied Luca. Because I believe that he didn't, hold to an evolutionary stance. So my question, Caleb, to you, since you do, would that be something you affirm? Since it seems like, I think a majority, all scientists would agree with that statement, or with that concept more so than a statement. Would that be something you affirmed as well?
So having not looked into like the specifics of it in general, I would defer and say, probably something like that. I do believe in common ancestry, and so I think it would be up to that point. I can talk to you all about this if you want, but I for me it's actually weirder. Like I at least understand the YEC view theologically, but the OEC view to me makes little sense theologically. Before I get to that, real fast question, but yes or no answer. I'm just curious. Do you all, for those who take like the Lapsarian view of like a fall, do you all think that did scorpions originally have pincers, stingers, and venom in the garden, or is that a later addition? I think it's just a curious question.
Those are post-diluvian creatures,
Yeah, they came around after.
If you're gonna say yes, it's unless God's preempting the fall, it's a little weird. And if you're gonna say no, then the speed, I guess the speed it would take for them to evolve those through adaptions would be way long. We have fall, even if you think the falls are during the flood, that's what, a 2,000 year period between the creation and the flood. So that's not that much time for them to be able to evolve that quickly to develop pincers and stingers and venom, given modern rates of change and stuff like that.
Gotcha. So
I'm with you on this, Caleb. I just wanted to let everybody know what you saw flash up on the screen there is we're getting spammed like crazy. And instead of letting me block it, it popped right back up, and then it made me. It actually, I don't know if it's viral or something on YouTube, but it had me actually click on it. So we're getting spammed. If you see anything in the comments, it's not us.
Ignore it.
It might be Tyler because he's a heretic.
Totally me. I'm trying to sabotage it.
Well, Davidson's awfully quiet. It might be him too. But anyways, go ahead, continue, guys. Go for it. I'm done. I just wanted to let the audience know that.
No, I think that whenever you go talking about just the science behind it, I think it's interesting whenever we see like Dr. Hugh Ross, who I respect. Like I can't say it anyway. I love it. I love him to death, and I look forward to what the future holds. I'll put it like that. But anyway. So it's interesting to see him say, just flat out, hey, we do not, affirm this concept. And then to actually dive into it, it seems like I said, like a majority of scientists do. And so the point that I'm trying to really show is that at some point, and correct me on this is wrong because I could be wrong on this. So, and I want your guys' thoughts on it. At some point, it seems like Christianity, if we're going to hold that the Bible is true, and I've heard all the young earth creationists argue, so I want your guys' view on this. We have to divert, right, from science at some point. And it just depends on what point you're going to divert from. You're still getting laughed out of the room for believing in God, right? And so, what's your guys' view on that? Because not only have I heard that, a lot, it came up, I think, on the episode we did with Dane. So, Caleb, we'll start with you, and then we'll just go around if you want to.
Well, I think that would depend on your epistemology. If you're a presuppositionalist and you start with the Bible, then yeah, you kind of would have to do that. If you're an evidentialist and classicist, then logic and evidence are what form your opinion. If you're starting with the idea, if I'm just going to look at evidence, there's evidence the Bible is true, therefore I affirm that, then I think you'd have to be willing to say that there's hypothetical evidence that could change your mind. But it really just depends on how you approach that. But I would be more in the latter camp. I think that God created science and nature are gifts from Christianity, from God. And I don't think that God would go out of his way to deceive us, or at least confuse us to such a degree as to make the earth really appear old by most dating mechanisms, and that he would give dinosaurs feathers that we found and all this other stuff where it really looks like it. So it's like, is it possible? I mean, theoretically it is, but I don't think it's very plausible to me. And I don't see a contradiction between faith and science. Let us remember that the Big Bang was discovered by a Jesuit priest, right? So, and so I think historically, and especially the church, the Catholic Church, even for the Reformation, was generally very pro science. Now they had the thing with Galileo, but that's usually blown out of proportion anyway. But I think that theism helps science because we believe in natural laws. We believe that God is the ultimate explanation, and so we know where to stop in terms of explanation. So I think all that's consistent with it. And I would agree with Alvin Plantinga that I think evolution is actually inconsistent with naturalism, and the conflict really lies between naturalism and science. But I don't have time to go into that. So
enough.
You do have time if you want to.
I do, but I
That's
want
an
to
open
go
mic.
first.
But I know what you're talking about.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
long.
I know.
Go
It
ahead,
is,
Josh.
yeah.
You're up next, buddy. I'll go last.
I was gonna say actually it's 5:00 now, so it's getting close for me to jump off here. But
Okay. Yeah.
I think that the way that we look at a conflict between science and religion is primarily because of the way that we think that they have to be separated, or they have to be competing views of things. I don't think that the idea of fact has to be conflated with the idea of truth. And I think that science is a tool that's designed to observe fact and regularity, and religion is simply not that tool. And so I don't think they should be pitted against one another. I think that's the error. But before I jump off here, one of the other things that I wanted to kind of touch on, and you guys go back to what you're talking about, but this is relevant and has been kind of turning in my head, but I didn't want to interrupt because you guys were going on some interesting stuff. So we were talking about predation. We were talking about the idea of death. We're talking about in the day you eat of it, you shall die. And I talked about eating. And you, Tyler, had mentioned the garments of skin. Something died. God was the one who did the killing, right? And then he granted to Adam and Eve these garments of skin, right? And he gave them to them because they were going to be expelled from the garden and go out into the world, right? And so in the same way as the meaning of eating, this garment of skin also has a meaning beyond its material composition of whatever kind of animal happened to die in order to make that take place, right? And so in the same vein, asking the question, what is the meaning of the garment of skin? What is it? What is a garment of skin, right? And in the same sense, we're wearing garments. They're just not made of skin anymore. So their composition is not necessarily important. What's important is what their function or their form or their meaning, right? And so in terms of that, one of the things that I think God was doing in granting the garments of skin to them, right, was to give them something like a buffer or a protection in their weakness against the world they were going to be confronted with outside that garden, right? And what humans have done is similar to what we did with predation and eating is take something to an extreme and get lost in it. I think the Tower of Babel was humankind's best attempt to a garment that would bring them outside of the nature they fell into, back up into the higher place where they wanted to be, instead of going to the mountain of God, which is Eden's the top of the mountain of God, right? The top of the mountain is the place of manifestation. They said, fine, we'll make our own mountain. And we use that as a garment. We use that as a protection. We use technology as the same thing. We use, writing and let's say we use an altar, right? Our memory needs to be supplemented with something. And so we make an altar, a stone place that we can return to in order to bring the past into the future with us, right? Mm-hmm. Because of our failure to have perfect memory, we don't have perfect understanding or perfect memory. And in our weakness, we supplement those weaknesses with more garments of skin, more technologies, more things that allow us to do things that we otherwise wouldn't have been able to do. Right. And so the reason I think that this is significant is because the thing that God said they were going to encounter on the outside of the garden, that he gave them the garments of skin for, which, by the way, garments of skin, when you dry them out, become leather, right? Leather protects you from things like thorns and thistles. And so life has hardship, and God gave us protection. He didn't take us out of the hardship. He gave us the means by which we could confront it successfully. And then what we said was, oh, this makes it easier rather than this makes it possible. And we started to chase that convenience in the same way that we looked at they looked at the fruit and they said, oh, this is something that will make us like God, rather than thinking we're like God and God gave us what we need. We say, oh, we need something and God's not handing it to us yet, so let's grab at it. Right. And I think a lot of the answers that we're looking for when we have these kind of contentions between science and religion is just one more of the same thing. We're looking at our weakness and saying we need to supplement this with something. So instead of looking at the universe through my eyes, I'll look at it through a microscope. Instead of looking at language through my ears, I'll look at it analogically or analytically through just the grammar and things like that. It's like language is so much bigger than grammar, right? It's the very means by which I can make your acquaintance, because I can see your face, but that doesn't mean I know you, right? It's our ability to communicate that really makes us unique from among the animals. And even so all of these things kind of tie together.
Enhances participation, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And the participation is our ability to interact with meaning on an ongoing basis, but willfully, right? Not just as a byproduct of meaning and us both being in the same place, but like you get to engage with meaning and participate with it or deviate from it. And that's your choice. You need to make that decision. Right. And so there's something about looking at the Genesis account through its meaning rather than through these kind of
means. I'm trying to, what you're saying here is really clicking with me right now as well. And I know what you're trying to say. I just want to add another caveat to it. I think that when we look at this, there's meaning and means. Meaning and means. That's just what I keep getting. Meaning and means. You're looking at the meaning of it and how important that is. And I think the means are just as important. Right.
Sure.
And I think we're looking at things like meaning and means. And I think we have to I don't even know what to say about it, but like I see what you're saying.
Well, I think that here's the thing is I had a conversation with I had a conversation with Richard, the atheist before when we were on CSG, and I talked about fourth, and I'll have to leave you guys with this, and you guys can kind of like mull this over or whatever. But there's 4 things that I think the universe is made out of in terms of human cognition and our participation with reality, right? There's 4 things that the universe is made out of. The first thing is not material. It's telos, it's purpose, it's intention. God's intention is the first thing that the universe is made out of, right? The second thing is the meaning that we can interact with because of that purpose. And so I don't think you're wrong at all. I think it's both of those things are primary. The next thing would be mathematical or numerical abstraction that gives you the ability to calculate or maneuver reality as you see fit or useful, or to wreck it for the same reason. And then the last thing would be material composition. That's the very last thing the universe is made out of, right? And so looking at those things, I think the only thing between the difference between that worldview that I just described from those 4 things and the way that the modern atheist looks at the world is simply by reversing the order. Material is first. then numerical abstraction. Then you make up your own subjective meaning so that you can assign a purpose or a telos to things, right? It's all done from the inside out rather than from the outside in, right? And so to reverse the order of things is to look at it differently in a primary fashion. And this is something that we talked about in the narrative episode also, is the emanation and emergence idea. Emergence is kind of a bottom up thing, and emanation is a top down thing, right? And so there's kind of a both and of that as well. But if we're looking at it from our perspective, receiving from the top down, the way that we're trying to look at things as a revelation from God, that's the most important thing, is purpose and meaning. And then we can interact with the world using those things, right?
And destiny, right?
Makes the world useful and meaningful to us specifically.
And then there's
But,
Destiny, which took place. A glimpse of it happened in the resurrection. Yeah, I agree, guys. I think both of you guys, you and Caleb, both really have put into words what I think I haven't been able to do successfully, even in our last debate. Maybe with a little bit of difference, obviously, because we're different people. But like, you know, and I think this is what Ross always tries to get across as well, is that, hey, look, there's a book of nature and there's a you know, revelation, right? There's God, and then there's, you know, he gives us the book of nature. You know, I think those idea of means and meaning, I think, yeah, and I agree, the teleos approach. This is why I think I'm developing in my theodicy, and Caleb, you'll be interested. Again, I'm still working on it, but
He's been telling me about the theodicy for like 6 months now, and it's
I
still-
know it's still developing, dude. I'm actually talking to
It's gonna
people
take a
off.
lifetime.
It's gonna take a long time. I want to develop this
I gotta hop off.
in a
guys.
way.
Josh.
All right, Josh.
Love you, buddy.
Yeah,
Bye, Josh.
take care, buddy.
Love you all. I
Well,
can't wait to come back and listen to the second half of this talk.
Yeah,
Thanks, Josh. Take care.
but it's gonna take a long time because I've got to get people's opinion that are outside of me, right? I've got to get more than just.
What if we see who
we've
can
got
get
it.
if I can get my book published before you?
Oh,
can
you
get your
will. You
theodicy
will.
done.
I just started really. I take a break from it here and there because I got other things that I have to get done. But I always come back to it, and I'm, like I said, I'm calling it the eschatological theodicy, which it's got a lot to do with teleology and purpose and stuff like that. But yeah,
Caleb,
it's
I
all
like that
involved there.
idea. I'll moderate it, and
Uh,
I'll keep people up to date on it.
But yeah,
so.
I mean,
Thanks.
so Tyler, when it comes down to it, yeah, I think you know,
Oh no, you muted yourself, buddy. It doesn't matter what you think. No, I'm just kidding. Uh-oh.
I hit my
There you go.
mic.
Why would you do that? You
Oh,
just about to tell me
Just don't
something
like
good.
it. He's
my
mad.
Focusrite went out too, so I don't know what's going on with that. But
Predestination.
yeah, I would
No.
just I would confirm a lot. I don't think there's a big divide with faith and science unless you take a particular stance on like presuppositionalism and
Yeah.
you keep it there.
I don't know. So I'll put it like this. In my research of this topic, which I'm so glad I dived into it, and I'll tell you guys, like I told David a while ago, like I can't wait for it to be over. To be
Can you hear
perfectly
me
honest,
now?
I cannot.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah.
Hear, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was just saying about presuppositionalism. Did you get that?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, he
Okay,
did. And Tyler
okay.
was talking.
Yeah.
Yo,
Okay.
we got you, buddy.
All right.
But
cool.
no, I'll just say this: like whenever I dug into this topic, I found that a lot more people now, there's kind of this stigma that science and religion, or Christianity even in particular, are at war with each other. And I was glad to find actually most people don't believe that now, and that's very, very refreshing. Another interesting concept I found is that Pew Research actually let out a poll when I think it was back in 2014, and that there's, you know, I don't know if it's a younger thing or just, you know, kind of in the groups, but again, there's this other stigma that most scientists are atheists, and that's not the fact either, right? It was really refreshing to see that only, I think it was 33% of scientists. I think they did the poll with 1,000 different people, and only 33% of them claimed atheism, and so we see a more openness, I guess, or maybe it never was, you know, less. Maybe this was always a thing, but a more openness to miracles. I know, Caleb, you wrote a book on miracles, but
Right,
that's something we're
I'm writing a book on miracles.
writing a book. My bad.
Yes.
My apologies.
No, it's
Fair
okay.
enough. I cannot wait to
Thank
see
you for
that.
promoting it, though.
Absolutely. Anytime. But is that something we see in the scientific community, that there's more of an acceptance of miracles in general overall, or?
I don't know about the scientific community. I do know that there was a poll done in 2004 of doctors and American doctors, and 75% of them believed in miracles, and miracles were defined as like things that are naturally inexplicable, and 55% of them said that they personally had witnessed what they would consider a miracle. So that's a pretty big proportion, and
Nice.
so I would say that's significant. I don't know how, I don't know if they've done anything more recent then, but even most Americans say that. So yeah, you have to take in mind that atheism is a pretty rare position globally. I mean, in the West and stuff, it seems to be popular, but like, I think it's about 7% of the world is atheist. It's about 15 that are non-religious, but half of those believe in some kind of higher power. So comparatively, very few people in terms of population really hold to like naturalism. That's pretty rare. So yeah, I guess people just act like that's a default sometimes, and it's like, why? Like, it's a very strange view from an anthropological perspective. Most people are just like, what do you mean you don't believe in God? Like, seems obvious to most people. So yeah, I just think it's a weird area. I'm just saying, I think methodological naturalism is a weird place to start. I think that most people start at other places, but yeah, I don't see a contradiction.
Well,
No,
Thor revealed himself in Chris Hemsworth, right?
That's right.
Exactly. Liam Hemsworth is
Awesome.
better, but
He is the incarnation.
So, Tyler, are you ready to wrap this up, brother?
Yeah, I think we've talked about a lot
Yeah.
of good things, good topics. I think we achieved what we were set out to do with this one, or at least I did anyway. And I
Yeah.
appreciate Caleb, you coming on with Josh and Sherman.
And I was pleasantly surprised, Tyler. It was
Nice.
good.
I'm
it was
glad.
nice.
I'm glad. You seem
Glad
to
I
enjoy
was
yourself.
surprised.
And you know what? I really liked. I thought you would like the intro, and you did. You even changed
It
our
was
names
beautiful.
back.
I did. It touched
It was so
me in that
inspiring.
spot.
It made us change
It
the names
did.
back.
So
We
you
had
know I
some
loved
goofy
it.
Names. My name was D-Bag David. His was Heretic Center, and Josh was Story Boy.
Story boy.
and Tyler saw the introduction. I did the Apollo 8 Christmas greeting from 1968. And yeah, that was beautiful. And that it launched us
loved it.
into creation. And you know what, guys? Like, we are in the creation debates now. We're in the creation discussions. We're in the science discussions. We're gonna have some really awesome guests. I'm gonna surprise you guys with. Tyler, me and Tyler are just communicating back and forth on who we're trying to get. We're trying to rush to get these guys settled
Yep.
in. I mean, we got scholars that are going to be giving us the exegete on certain things, and then the science on certain other things, and then
Hebrew
answering tough
scholars,
questions. So
scientists.
guys, what I did was, hey, look,
Oh my.
Hebrews and scientists, yes, but yeah, guys, like, what I did was I did some research on some common scientific questions that really keep people from the faith, people are confused of, that are not even part of the faith. Some of the biggest questions that people ask, and you'd be surprised at what they are. So yeah, we're gonna hit those. We're gonna knock those out of the park with like interviews and stuff. We're gonna try to like throw in some debates in there between naturalists and theists and so forth. So we're just gonna try to do it all, So
Do you have
we're
one
gonna-
of those questions off
we're
the
gonna
top,
knock it out
David?
this summer.
What's
I-
one of those questions? that
Does
we're gonna
evolution
address?
prove the Bible false? Obviously, Caleb's still here, so
say
he would
nope.
disagree.
No. I'm hoping you would say the same thing as well.
I would say that it doesn't prove the Bible false, even though I do believe in special creation when it comes to mankind. And again, I think there's some mechanisms in evolution that I can't square with right yet, and
That
we'll
would
get
be a
into
good
that some
debate.
other. We'll get into that. Well, I can get Fuzzrana on that for you if you
That's what
if
I'm
you'd
saying.
like.
We could-
Maybe I don't want to speak for
Evolution
Fuzz.
versus,
he's now
does-
he's now the president of
Hey.
and soon he'll be the president of RTB. So
Hey,
But
I
yeah.
got a question. I'm glad you brought that. Can we turn that question into a debate?
maybe I think they would probably jump on that. We'll see.
Okay.
We'll see.
To our
Expect-
listeners, if
you know
you
what-
like that idea,
you know what? I
let
really
us
would
know.
like to put it on the radio too, and make it a subsidy of YouTube. But we'll
Yes.
see. Yeah, but we got a lot of stuff coming up, guys. We're gonna
Yep.
keep trying to push out content. Sometimes we're dealing with some technical stuff with the radio station and stuff like that. So
It's getting fixed.
we might
It's
take
getting
some
fixed.
stuff, and it's
Yep.
getting fixed, and we're gonna work with it, and we're just gonna keep rolling and do the best we can for you guys. Caleb, again, thank
Yep.
you for being here, man.
Thank you, brother.
No problem. Thanks for. Well, I know you didn't invite me, but thanks for allowing me to.
Oh, you're always invited, man.
thank
I
you
don't
for
have to
dropping
invite
by.
you. I don't have to invite you for you to be invited, man. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. All right. Well, guys, I hope everybody enjoyed this. Tyler, you want to close us out, my friend?
Yeah, just, I can't reiterate enough, keqqradio.com. You can catch Faith Unaltered every single Friday. We're going to be up and running on StreamYard and the radio station simultaneously. So that's why we're experiencing these technical difficulties. We do got big things coming. We got website in the works, and so that's exciting. And man, we just got a lot of Faith Unaltered content for you all, so keep it subscribed. If you are not subscribed to the channel, give us a thumbs up. If you loved this video, let us know what you want to hear. Email us. faithunaltered@gmail.com is the place to contact David and myself, and we'll see you next time, y'all. Faith Unaltered, good night, God bless, stay like Christ.